My favorite prop for Saturday's slate involves Missouri's Brady Cook, plus all the most revealing stats from the first half of the Missouri season coming up right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On to get started. And of course, we're going to get started today with Missouri's game against the Kentucky Wildcats, a game that Missouri is, frankly, if you don't beat Kentucky, you're probably not going to have as good of a season as you want. That's what a lot of Missouri seasons have come down to in the last decade or so since joining the SEC. And something I talked about a lot in the previous program is I think Missouri will almost certainly have a heavier box defensively, just committing more players to the run game for all intents and purposes defensively. I think you have to dare Kentucky to beat you with explosive passing plays over the top. And while I don't think Devin Leary has been off to a great start this season, I don't think the Kentucky receivers are nearly as good as Missouri's receivers, for instance. I do have to say that, again, Liam Cohen's a really good play caller. If you're an everyday listener of this show, that's something I've gone on and on about a lot. I think he makes a big difference. So if he can scheme some explosive plays open for the Wildcats, I certainly won't be surprised. And on the flip side, I think after watching the Georgia game, I think Kentucky's pass defense, for all the nice statistics out there about Kentucky having a really good defense, I just don't really fear Kentucky's pass defense whatsoever in terms of their secondary or in terms of Kentucky's pass rush either. They got basically no pressure on the quarterback against Georgia. At halftime, Mark Stoops was saying that his ball club didn't tackle anybody the entire half. So I think Kentucky is absolutely going to have to score in this game. And if Missouri is able to bottle up Ray Davis and that Kentucky rushing attack, well, frankly, I think the Wildcats are in trouble. Now, honestly, though, I don't totally anticipate it. I think that Missouri is not going to get gashed like Florida did by Kentucky, certainly. But at the same time, Ray Davis and company had pretty good success against Georgia early in that ball game, just standard downs, rushing the football for 6-7 yards a pop. The problem is Kentucky would step on its own foot with drive-killing penalties, missed shots in the passing game, et cetera, et cetera. It was never really the running game's fault, so I suspect Kentucky will be able to rush the ball effectively against Missouri, and since that's going to be the case, I think we're probably in for another dogfight, another relatively high-scoring dogfight, but not as high-scoring as Missouri and LSU's game was. Kentucky isn't that kind of offense. Again, they also, as I said in my previous episode, they move the ball very methodically as well, among the absolute slowest, if not the slowest paced team in all of FBS football right now. Not just in the SEC, easy for me to say, but also nationally throughout the country as well. They're just a very, very slow-paced team. That doesn't mean they're a bad offense. It just means they don't move quickly. That's going to keep the score down. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm going to predict a Missouri victory, though. I just have a feeling that because Kentucky's defense kind of overshadowing their struggles in pass defensive, overshadowed, I think, maybe to a Missouri fan at least, Missouri's own struggles here defensively. maybe in recent weeks. So I'm going Tigers 31-24, picking up a big victory in Lexington. And because we're exactly halfway, in fact, through the Missouri season, I think it's a good time to dig into the statistics, figure out exactly what Missouri's doing well and what they aren't doing well. And really, when you dig into the defensive side of the football for Missouri, a lot of talk about how the defense has regressed this season to some extent. Boy, it really seems like some of Missouri's results so far are a little bit fluky, because most of these numbers have the Tigers in the middle of the pack or even above average in the SEC in most categories, except for one category that sticks out like a sore thumb, and that's the percentage of snaps in which Missouri has allowed a touchdown. Missouri is not only the worst in the league, they're the worst in the league by a pretty good amount. And considering, again, all the rest of the stats, no matter what way you want to look at it, Missouri is, again, at least average, if not above average defensively. That just doesn't really add up in terms of a sustainable outcome. So really, I think in the future here, that just points to, I think, a lot of times Missouri's worst moments have been blown coverages, missed assignments, miscommunication, whatever it might be that lead to an easy 30-yard touchdown where a guy is left uncovered, like Malik Neighbors was this past weekend against LSU. Again, one of the best receivers in the entire country. Obviously, you're not going to just leave him wide open. That wasn't the plan whatsoever. So again, like Eli Drinkwitz said, there isn't some magical coverage or scheme that Missouri is going to come up with this week that's going to make its defense more effective. I think it's just simply put, they need to execute what they're trying to do more effectively. Now, against Kentucky, I could certainly see the argument for more man coverage, more guys in the box, a more aggressive style Missouri defense that was maybe a little bit more reminiscent of last season. I don't know that that would have worked well against LSU because of Jaden Daniels' particular set of skills. But to me, against Devin Leary in Kentucky, I think you can get away with that. His legs obviously are not what Jaden Daniels are. I mean, frankly, whose are? And obviously, if I'm saying Missouri is going to win 31-24, that means I think the Tigers are going to cover the spread of 2.5 points. Well, cover the spread. They're getting 2.5 points. I think the Tigers are going to win outright, but also the 50.5 on the total. Well, obviously, I have that going over as well. But you know what? Those two propositions, those two bets, I don't see enough value in either one of those to tell you to pluck down your hard-earned bucks on either one. But you know what? There is more action with our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Actually, there's a Brady Cook prop that I like quite a bit. So I want to tell you about that opportunity. But first, you know what? Let's snap into this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers do get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, totals, player props, and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. So over at FanDuel Sportsbook, it's easy to find the Missouri-Kentucky line, money line, totals, all that good stuff. You may not have noticed bottom right-hand corner under all these wagers, it says more wagers. Hey, click there and you'll notice, hey, there's a lot of player props as well. Well, that leads me to Brady Cook's yardages for the game, the alt yardages. Well, you can pick, there's a lot of different options there. You can go Brady Cook over 200 yards, 225, 250, et cetera, et cetera. To me, the best value here is Brady Cook throwing for 300 or more yards at plus 200. I just believe in this Missouri passing game. I think they'll hit enough explosive plays once again, I really believe in this Missouri receiving core as well, obviously. And you know what? Missouri's pass protection has been really good for the most part, too. Obviously, a bad moment that led to a strip sack against Brady Cook that basically ended the game against LSU last week. But really, for the most part, I think Cook's pass protection has been very, very solid. And again, from what I saw from Kentucky, it just doesn't seem like they're able to put all that much pressure on the passer either. And when Brady Cook has a clean pocket, he's been really, really tough to beat this year. So Cook already with multiple 300-yard games. I realize, again, Kentucky's going to limit the possessions and snaps just a little bit for sure. But to me, at 2-1 odds, yeah, give me Brady Cook to throw for 300+ in this ball game. And speaking of statistics, I brought this up in the previous segment. I want to delve even more deeply into the advanced stats. And one thing you notice is that Brady Cook so far, his percentage of play action passes, 16% so far. And indeed, Missouri has picked up the amount of play action, at least it seems like it, certainly the effectiveness of their play action game the last few weeks. Well, I've been saying, I keep bringing it up, and to some of you, if you're an everydayer, you're probably going, okay, John, we get it. Play action fakes. We got it. Missouri should do it. Well, to my point, the reason I keep bringing it up is because there is still room for Missouri to do more of that. If you look at Devin Leary, for instance, the Kentucky quarterback, you look at Carson Beck, the Georgia quarterback, well, they're nearly twice what Brady Cook is doing in terms of play action percentage. They're at nearly 30%. In fact, they're a little bit over 30%, nearly twice what Brady's number is at about 16%. So as effective as it's been for Missouri, to me, the first down, second down, use it all the time. Even on third down, it can be effective, especially third and short. All that play action stuff, to me, just keep it going. Up that percentage even more if you're Kirby Moore and Eli Drinkwitz. As for the rest of the Missouri passing game, in the offseason, I predicted that Luther Burden would be a target monster when he moved inside to the slot. Well, that is indeed the case. He's leading the SEC in target share with 37% of Missouri's passes headed this way, and all the stats back up exactly what we've seen, that Luther Burden's one of the absolute best players in the conference. And what you may not have seen, though, and the stats back it up, is that Mookie Cooper has been highly, highly efficient when he's been throwing the ball this year. A 75% success rate and no drops, too, for Mookie Cooper. So a guy who's the third, fourth option on most of his action, well, he's as good as he is, as fast as he is as a player. He's going to be beating a lot of third corners, fourth corners, safeties, linebackers. That's a tough matchup for just about anybody, and speaks to just how good Missouri's receiving core is right now. And speaking of that core, Theo Weiss has been good, obviously, this year. I think he's been even better than he's shown up in his traditional stats because, among other things, the largest percentage of uncatchable targets on the team for Theo Weiss. For whatever reason, it just seems like occasionally when Brady Cook is off target, the ball just seems to be headed Theo Weiss's way. Maybe that's because he doesn't have as much experience with Weiss as Mookie Cooper and Luther Burden, for example. Or maybe it's just all statistical noise. All I know is Theo Weiss has been a really good player, and obviously Marquise Johnson's average depth of target, yards per reception, yards per attempt are just completely off the charts in a small sample size as well. And transitioning to the Missouri running backs, the verdict isn't quite as kind to the backs as it is to the wide receivers. In particular, Nate Peat is somebody who I was wondering and openly wondering why he didn't get more touches last week against LSU. Well, you dig a little bit deeper into the numbers, and so far, Nate Peat just hasn't been an effective rusher for the most part. In fact, among qualified rushers in the SEC, he is the worst, dead last, in yards after contact. Cody Schrader, of course, is middle of the pack in that category. And he's also 5th in the league in yards before contact. Now, what does that tell us? That actually tells us that maybe Missouri's offensive line has been doing a better job in the running game than it's gotten credit for. And indeed, if you look at that before contact stat, it's 3 Tennessee running backs at the top of the league in that category. So again, that tells you that whatever Tennessee's problems in the running game have been at times, it's hard to argue that the offensive line is the issue. And you know what? When it comes to Nathaniel Pete, he's also 3rd worst in negative run percentages, and that's after 2 quarterbacks in Jaden Daniels and Jackson Dart for Ole Miss. Also, Pete and Schrader haven't been particularly adept at breaking tackles either, although I will say Pete does have a really high percentage of explosive runs, and neither Schrader nor Pete, they just have 1 fumble this season. I should say Pete with no fumbles this season after obviously a famous fumble against Auburn last season, just the 1 fumble for Schrader so far. So I think the numbers kind of tell you what we thought about Cody Schrader. He's a solid, workman-like running back. He's not an upper echelon type running back that maybe the total rushing yards would lead you to believe. But he's not a lower tier player either. He's a perfectly solid starting running back in the SEC. What's surprising to me is just how ineffective Pete has been by the advanced stats when in the past, at his career at Stanford in particular, the numbers have liked him quite a bit. So is this just noise? Is this just 6 games in here? Again, Pete does have some decent explosive runs here on the season, but so far he hasn't exactly won over a lot of his skeptics, I would say. And recently I've talked a lot about the homogenization of football here in college lately, particularly with offensive football. Well, it turns out, again, I dove real deep into the stats here. The number 1 passing route combination that Missouri has run by far more than any other, well, it happens to be the same route combination that the SEC, the rest of the teams in the conference, have run more than any other as well. Well, I'll tell you what combination that is. I'll explain to you why I think that particular play has become so popular throughout the league, coming right up. But first, as many of you know, these days it can be a real gamble anytime you hire somebody for your small business. So you want to be as close to 100% that you have access to the best qualified candidates possible. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. With simple tools like screening questions, they make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience. You can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. Again, LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. According to SEC StatCat, Missouri has 2 plays that it has ran far more than any other this season. I don't think it's going to come as a huge shock to any of you. Inside zone read and outside zone are by far and away the 2 plays that Missouri has called the most this season. In fact, fully 16% of Missouri's plays have been inside zone reads, and just about 15.5% have been outside zones. And that is a little bit, I would say, what am I trying to say here? What word am I looking for here, folks? Help me. It's a little bit misleading. There we go. It's a little bit misleading because it's not as though Missouri has been a run-focused team. Missouri's obviously thrown the ball a ton, but the reality is you're just going to have fewer run concepts than you are passing concepts. So it is notable that actually the 3rd most called play by Missouri is a passing concept. Flood variations is what it's labeled here by SEC StatCat. And indeed, in the top 5 plays called throughout the conference, flood variations is the only passing concept that shows up. The other 4, all run plays. inside power, inside zone read, outside zone, and inside power read. So again, if you think Missouri calls a lot of outside zone, well, you're right. They do call it a lot, but you know what? The rest of the league calls a lot of outside zone and inside zone as well. They just don't do it quite as much as Missouri does. But again, I just find the fact that the flood concept, flood variations, if you will, that is the most common play in college football, apparently, at least in SEC football and Missouri football, is fascinating to me. I have a theory of why this is. Now, I'll just give you a visual of what the flood type play is for those of you who are uninitiated with these X's and O's. Essentially, a flood play, well, you're going to have all of your eligible receivers running either to the right side of the field or the left side of the field for all intents and purposes. All of the routes are going to go in that direction. So if you have receivers to your right, well, they're all going to run passes to the right, routes, and out to the right, for instance, a route to the flat in the right. Whereas on the players on the left, well, guess what? They're also going to go to the left. They're going to run drag routes across the field, in-breaking dagger-type routes, something like that. The point is, this is an effective play against zone because, well, zone defense is, of course, designed to cover the entire field. So if you flood, hey, there's the name for you. If you flood one side of the defense, well, that kind of messes up their zones, doesn't it? You suddenly have more receivers in an area than there are defenders. At least that's the theory. Now, another reason I think that this play has become popular is it's not only effective against zone, it's effective against man coverage as well. Of course, drag routes, shallow crossers, those are always an effective and difficult thing to stop against man coverage. Again, that's a part of just about any type of flood concept. And finally, I also think that the flood concept is easier for quarterbacks to process multiple options. Especially at the college level, there's a lot of guys that are, hey, one read and go. If my primary receiver isn't open, I'm going to tuck the ball and run with it. Even the really good players, for the most part, generally speaking, you're going to have time to look at your primary guy, look at your check down, and then maybe you can tuck the ball and run as your third option. Most quarterbacks are not going through 3, 4, and certainly not 5 options on every single play. But I will say the flood concept, because all of your options are more or less coming to one side, you can sort of see the different levels too. It does make it easier to process those reads faster. So again, I think that's one of 3 reasons there why the flood concept has become so popular, not only among Missouri, but in all of college football, clearly. And thanks for joining me here on Locked On Mizzou. As always, for you everydayers, be sure to check out the show Sunday morning with a Saturday night game. There's just no way I'm staying up that late for the people who are still up at midnight for me to post my show. Frankly, I get up too early for that these days. Those little kids, they just take it out of you. What can I say? So I will see you all Sunday morning right here on Locked On Mizzou.